right, good evening. It is 5 o'clock on Monday, May 20th. I'd like to call to order the Education Operations Committee meeting of the Wausau School District. The first item is to approve the minutes of April 22nd, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the School Forest Lodge project. So that would be Wausau School Foundation Executive Director Paula Clark and School Forest Coordinator Jerry Maney are going to present for us.
Well, good evening, everybody.
Hey, good evening, Jerry.
It's exciting to be here.
Yep.
Once again, our project is rolling along. So we've got some updates to share with you, some renderings, some floor plans that we've made some changes to. And we put together what we're calling a case statement. Paul and I have worked on this with help and edits from other people in the district, including Chris Nelson, who works with me, Amy, Keith. And what we're trying to do is not show you and show people exactly what the School Forest Lodge might look like, but really try to come as close as we can and have something that we can take out to probably 30 to 40, possibly 50 people late this summer and into early fall. People who have some influence and maybe some financial ability to support us with this project. So that's what we have in front of us here. And I think we'll just kind of go through the pages. I'll help talk through. Please feel free to interrupt, ask questions, make comments, share suggestions at any point during our project. The first page there, the front, is an artist's rendering of what it might look like. I don't know that we'll have a blacktop parking lot. I do know that I would like to take the old bell from the top of the current Red Lodge and move it down in front and have something similar to what we have out here in front of Longfellow to capture that history of the school forest, the building, the bell, and try to utilize some of what is the old lodge in probably more the interior of the new lodge than the exterior. So again, just keep in mind, we wanted, the idea that kids are coming in, kids are arriving for a day. There's a rather cubist looking school bus sitting there in the background. But so people see that this is going to be, when you come to the school forest, there's a welcoming looking lodge that you come on in, and there's going to be plenty of room for everybody to get our day started. Thank you. On the second page there, it just kind of is an opportunity for us to think about our timeline. The school forest has been in existence for many, many years. The lodge that we currently use in the background there behind Ann and I was a Civilian Conservation Corps barracks, which was, I've been told, at the base of Rib Mountain, but I think it's between Rib Mountain and Lake Wausau was the actual location. And if you look at the picture in the bottom right and you compare it to the picture behind Ann and I, it's the same building, but it has been revised and remodeled and resided and re-roofed and refloored numerous times throughout its history. So we do want to try to capture some of that historic part of the building, but it's changed so much that I know there's a sentiment that, oh my gosh, we have to save that building because it's historic and it's so important. And there's very little of it that's original anymore, in our opinion. But we do want to use the rock from the fireplace, use that to make a fire feature outside, probably in the front of the building, for an outdoor gathering focal point. The bell for sure. If we can save some of the larger timbers inside and use them, you'll see some of the inside renderings later on. We are trying to be sensitive and keep that in mind. And we did think it was important to provide a link to people to take a look at the story that appeared in the city pages last summer. There's a lot of good background there for people who aren't as familiar with the project and with the history of the school forest. Some numbers for you. Last year at our school forest, we hosted 14,336 unique visitors from the Wausau School District. And we say unique visitors because we had everybody from infants through pre-K through 12th grade. We had college learners, we've had adult learners, we've had teachers, paraprofessionals, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, everybody under the sun. And it always pleases me when the day comes to an end and an adult says to me, I learned so many things today, or I learned something every time I come back here. And I'm proud of that. So it's not just those 8,000 plus students that we serve, but it's the rest of the community as well. And almost 4,000 students from other districts that came into the school for us and were able to have a good day in nature and learn the things that we think are very important. We're trying to build citizenship that, first of all, is aware of our environment, they value our environment, they get knowledge about our environment, and as they get to be older learners, they're equipped with skills to go out and work in the environment and try to make a difference and improve our environment. And that's a pre-K through 12th grade curriculum, a vision that we've had for 20 plus years now. More and more districts are interested in coming. I've been in contact with Marathon District very recently. They've had their 5th and 6th graders out for several years. This spring their 3rd grade came out, and now they're looking to see if they can bring all of their grade levels out because they're liking what we're doing. Which is another great reason to look at having more capacity than we have right now with our current buildings. We are operated at full capacity every school day. We schedule for smaller groups for our pre-K through 4th grades, usually between 50 and 75 students a day. And when we get to our bigger groups, our middle school groups, we'll be up to 250 kids on an average day. Tomorrow, John Muir's 7th grade is coming out, and we will have a lot of very excited, eager young ladies and men out experiencing the environment and down in the pond and doing survival activities and team building activities. So we're busy, and it's not just during the school year, it's all year long. We had students on site over 250 days last year. 348 visitors during our summer program. Those are our 5th grade going into 6th grade transition students. A very successful program, and honestly we need more room in order to continue to do that program well and safely, and to be able to provide more activities for them where they need the technology and they need the ability to use their devices in order to record what it is that we're doing and share it with other learners. A destination for 14 other groups from other school districts, and Miss Pam and Miss Jane dished up 17,777 meals, which is pretty cool to feed a lot of people. So our timeline, this started back in 2015 when Larry Seiler actually came to Chris and I, and we were looking at that 90-year-old Red Lodge and saying, what do we need to do really to fix this? And we started out talking about it and did some talking to some architects and some construction people, and discovered that it would cost us almost $500,000 to renovate and repair what we had without doing anything to increase our classroom space, which is what we need to offer the programming that we already are and want to continue to do in the future. Shortly after that, the district was involved in rebuilding several elementary schools, you'll remember, all at the same time. And we didn't feel that was a good time to go out and try to find more money to spend in the district. So we continued to develop our vision and our floor plans, but we knew it wasn't quite the right timing to go out financially and try to make that happen. But now we think it is the right time. So as of February, Paula came on board with the Wausau School Foundation, and they have stepped forward and would like to be our integral fundraising partner in this endeavor. And in March and April, we've been working together to develop a timeline on how that might look, and doing some things in the district with Larry and with Bob Keith to try to get more realistic numbers for what we're going to need to build the building that we want to build, and put together when we're going to go out and share that with folks, and the timeline to where we would actually be breaking ground. So now here we are in May, and we'll continue to look at this for the next few minutes, but then Paula's going to walk us through what the school foundation is looking at doing to help us gather the finances that we want to do to complete this. And our goal is to be able to build this building without having to go to referendum to get the capital. So we'll see. I'm excited. I'm very optimistic. I think that the support is out there for us. Plan B is, if we come up a little bit short, well, then we'll be talking about that, and we're looking at a 2020 referendum perhaps. The next page, is really the case for why we need this new building. Capacity. as I mentioned, when we're there with our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, especially now that we're moving to more of a junior high, less of a middle school concept at John Muir, we'll be having bigger groups of kids out there than ever at the same time. So we need more indoor spaces so that when the weather is inclement, we can still provide authentic experiences and be able to keep them there. Not have to send them back home because it's raining and we don't have enough inside places to keep kids dry. Same thing for safety in thunderstorms or in cold weather when the kids are out during the winter time, to have a bigger variety of indoor places and activities that we can do with kids if it's really cold for 2 or 3 days in a row. So the capacity is really huge. That was really the first reason why we started looking at this new project. And as I said, the weather, right now, if it gets to be just way too wet, we cancel for the day. And we try to build in 1 or 2 or 3 days throughout the late spring that the groups that had to be canceled during the winter or because of rain or flooding or whatever the case may be, we can try to make them all up. And we've done that this spring after a very challenging winter, as you know, with days where school was canceled, by doubling up on a lot of days and bringing 2 small groups in together, but then it goes back to capacity. It's very challenging, especially when it comes to feeding kids at lunchtime and you've got 2 groups there at the same time and so forth. And I would like to have a school forest where we would have the ability to use technology more. I don't ever want it to change into something where kids come out and sit in front of computers to study the outdoors. But I think it is really legitimate for kids to come out, take a device that they can use to record what it is that they're doing outdoors, perhaps take a picture of a wildflower in the spring or record the data that they're measuring out of the creek, be able to bring it back in and then be able to share that with students in other sites or in other communities or working on other rivers or living in New Orleans and seeing what the water quality is there compared to what it was up here at the beginning of the watershed. So we need space and we need the technological ability to be able to run those devices and to access the internet. Right now we have 1 little dial-up modem and 1 computer, basically a closet in the kitchen that 4 people share on a daily basis. And I have my smartphone, which is my savior. I mean, that has saved me countless trips back and forth to central office here to be able to take care of that kind of business. Questions or comments about that? That's really the meat of why we need what we're asking to do.
Notice in the photo, there's that is taken in the lodge, and we ran across information that the chalkboard was donated in 1961. And the kids are sitting on folding chairs, and usually every time I've been there, the heat's not working and there's a fire going in the fireplace. So.
Which is great.
I like my 1961 chalkboard.
Yeah.
And the kids do too.
And the fire. And the fire.
We almost needed it tonight.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So promise for the future?
I just wanted to make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I like your idea of implementing the technology into it, because there's so many different things that you can do with environmental sciences going out there. And starting the environmental sciences at an earlier age and start looking at the data immediately and the quality and things of that fashion. So you're right, I can definitely see what you're talking about.
Thank you. Well, if we are able to pull together the finances and make this happen, we will have the ability to double the number of students that we have there on a daily basis, which might mean simply we have the same kids from the district coming out, but they're coming out for 2 visits a year at 2 different seasons of the year rather than the 1 day a year that all of our pre-K through 4th graders are afforded at this point in time. Or it might let us to bring in more of surrounding communities, which is a revenue enhancer for us as well. It also gives those people throughout Marathon County the same opportunities to learn and experience the things that we do at the school first every day. We would have 6 new teaching spaces, expanded classrooms, so that when teachers, for example, tomorrow morning come out from John Muir, they each have their own nice indoor place where they can set up their equipment and their activities for the day, and they don't have to keep their fingers crossed that it doesn't rain, because if it rains in the afternoon, what they did in the morning won't work anymore, and so on and so forth. So those new learning spaces will be just huge for us.
I was wondering about the new learning spaces for violent weather, because we get tornadoes and they pop up. If we expand this, is part of the lodge going to be shelter?
Hurricane proof or shelter or
Yeah.
yeah,
Because do we have enough space for all that capacity
Right.
in our current setup?
With what we have right now, we don't. And that is really a great point that we have to investigate more with our architects. You know, originally, we were looking at doing a 2-floor building with part of it being underground basement. In doing some preliminary investigation with the DNR, we're in the 100-year floodplain, so we can't go below grade there. It has to be above grade. If we do 2 floors above grade, it gets extremely expensive because we have to include an elevator and a sprinkler system throughout the building. Not saying that that makes it impossible, but it would make it quite challenging from budget-wise. So, and Larry, feel free to chime in on the current blueprint as far as safety from storms and so forth.
As it exists today, there is no designated storm shelter per se. And as Jerry said, there is not a basement because of the environmental concerns of where it physically sits. We still do have the basement of Bannerman Hall. In the event of inclement weather, it's going to be snug. Get to know your neighbor well. Those are really our only options at this point.
Mr. Meany, regarding the private fundraising of $1 million to $1.5 million, and if you had to go to Plan B, I'm sorry if I missed, but did you have an internal deadline set where if you didn't reach that goal, then you would start thinking about that Plan B?
I guess,
Yeah.
go ahead, Paul.
I can talk to that. I just want to point out real quickly too, that the last 2 slides are, as far as our campaign goes, we'll be testing this with donors. And I'm just going to bring that up real quick because you mentioned storm safety. That might be something that comes up where people are really wanting in this new project, and someone might come forward and say, I'd like to donate X amount of money to also do that. So, and these 2 pages that you've seen will change as we talk to donors over a testing period. So the timeline is, I believe, Larry's hoping to get a price hopefully by July. So we have a better idea how much the whole project will cost. And then what's going to happen is the capital campaign. Do you want me to just start? Or
Go ahead, Paul.
we were kind of close to that anyway here. So the capital campaign, technically a capital campaign runs 1 to 2 years depending on how long and how much money you need. And talking with people that I know in Wausau that have done a lot of campaigns, they think this is kind of a good timeline for us. And that is, we're going to be this summer testing that with donors. We're going to be bringing 40, 50 people in, and we're going to get their impact and their opinion on these issues. And as capital campaign feasibility phase, we'll be asking them questions like, what do you think of this project? Do you think that's a good idea? We'll ask, one of the questions we'll ask is how much money range would you be willing to donate? And we're asking that question because that helps us gauge how much money we can engage or raise through this campaign. And then also if they'd be involved in the campaign itself. Then when those are done, we're hopefully like around September, August, into August, September, we'll have a realistic number on what is that 85% of what we've talked to people about would be asked in the quiet phase. The other 15% would be added on during the public phase, so we would have a good ballpark on how much our community is supporting this effort. So the answer to the question is, so then, and then actually the private phase would, or the ask would be in the fall to donors, and then we'd make it public that we're having this campaign sometime when that finishes up, and then we'll go into the public phase. So hoping to get this all wrapped up by February. So I hope that answers your question there. We'll have a better feel for the amount of money we can raise. Also, I'll be doing a lot of grant writing on the side too in hopes to get additional funding there. So that's kind of how a campaign goes. There's steps involved, and the community or the Wausau Foundation, Wausau School Foundation is being has a wonderful board of directors, and I think everybody's very dedicated to this project, very excited. And I've been in nonprofit 30 years, and I can say this is the most excited board I've ever worked with that wants to ask for money and get involved and see this happen. So, yeah. So that's all. I was gonna share, so.
Yeah.
So if by late February, this is what we've been able to get, verbal confirmation that we can expect coming from those 30 to 50 people, corporations, donors. And then we're looking for another 15% is kind of the model that we're following from families and friends. And I've had people say to me, when you're ready, you tell me, and our family's going to give you this much, And Paul and I have talked about some different ideas for being able to put some displays up in public areas where, buy a leaf and put it on the tree kind of thing with your family's name on it. And that'll be exciting. But that should give us a really good idea by late February, if we aren't able to raise the entirety of the sum, what it is that we would need to supplement it in order to get forward with the project. Okay?
Thank you.
The next one is an artist rendering, a revision again of what the inside of the large gathering hall would look like. The windows, which, some people have said to me, looks like you're building a church out there, Jerry. Well, what we're hoping is that we'll be able to make that framing in the windows look like trees. It's supposed to be trees with branches. And I think once it's made out of logs, rather than just, the computer drawing of it, it will look a lot more natural. I like the outside view of the same glass a lot better than I like what it looked like on the inside. And what I asked them to try to capture on the sides was, it will have a large open space for gathering where we can have, a greeting and orientation discussion when groups come in the morning. But I also want to have displays along the sides where we look at some of those main topics that we do with our kids as they're coming through school. So focus animals, interactive displays where you can go up and touch the different screen parts, and it tells you about the history of the wild turkey and the calls the turkey makes, and have some of the actual mounted turkeys there, and the white-tailed deer and the timber wolf, and one about pollution and one about carbon sinks and all of those things, little things that we do throughout the curriculum as the sides, and something where if a teacher's not there, but a kid can continue to walk up to it and learn it, or an adult can too. I don't know how many fish we'll have on the wall, but the artist was very happy. We keep seeing lots of fish in our window. So if you look at our floor plan on the next page, that's the most current one. And going back to your question, Jane, about storm shelters, that gathering room with that large glass front probably isn't that. But the classrooms on the sides, they will have some windows, so we'll have to do some talking about, so how stormproof can you make those places with having windows in them and so
We
forth.
can always do the hurricane
Exactly.
shutters on a couple of
Yeah,
windows.
perhaps, yeah. It does give us some office space, it gives us some more restroom space. I do want to have more space for when kids come in to be able to store their belongings and to have places that we can dry boots efficiently and hang up coats and mittens and things like that, right where we first come in. So I won't read that to you, but that's what we're looking at. A fireplace in the corner, I just think it's got to have a fireplace to have that lodge feeling, that inviting, feeling of being in the North Woods. And whether we have a fire that actually burns wood or we do something that's LP burning or something has been a continuing discussion that we've had. And there's a lot of codes and things like that involved, especially if kids are going to be able to watch it and so forth. So.
And there'll still be the fire pits outside.
Absolutely, yeah, and the firewood fireplace and bedroom hall will always be there. So, yeah. The second floor, because I did want that large vaulted classroom space, I wanted to keep that in there, and they were able to say that we could have a mezzanine area, which would give us potentially another area for kids to be more of an informal place. I picture it as being a place with carpet squares or beanbag chairs where kids could sit down in smaller groups and discuss the topics of the day, or we could be looking at some of our library books or things like that. And then we get on to the page where we talk about our current financial situation. Right now, we have $634,800 assigned in the fund balance coming from.
He's got the wrong page.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I skipped the wrong page. Right, that seems good.
Oh, I apologize.
Before I get to the funding, I'll just talk real briefly about the Wausau School Foundation. Our presentation today is not to really ask for grants, but I want to bring to your attention how many people we're going to have to ask for donations, and we also need prospects. There's actually scientific charts that you can put in what you want to raise, and it tells you how many people you need to meet. And and how many gifts you'll get, and at what range you need to have them. So right now, our gift range table is kind of all over the place, but we do need approximately 300 donors that can give between $2,800 and $1 million. And then, so the under 2,800, there's going to be probably another 500 people that will be hitting the public face and trying to raise money too. So, and so I'd like to ask for your help, or our foundation would like to ask for your help. We're not looking for donations right now. We want to make sure that we test this properly before and do the right process through it. So if you are interested in being part of that interview process, even if you're not going to want to donate that much, I welcome that you be a part of it so you know what it is like. And if you have any individuals that you think that we should be interviewing, please share some information in their name with us.
I think we talked about before about going to the graduation classes. A lot of them have their own Facebook pages. And
Sure.
I think as my 40th was last year, but people are nostalgic, and we all love the school forest.
Yep.
Yeah, great suggestion.
We start with a kind of a core committee, and it's going to be made up of a couple board members and some community members that have done a lot of capital campaigns before to help us make the plan. And we'll be assembling a lot of committees, but we'll also be looking at different groups and how we're going to approach them and when we'll approach them and so forth and so on. The alumni records here are 19 years old right now. So I graduated in 1979 from East, and I just share that with you, just share. That's who I know, and my brothers and sisters are older.
So your 40th is this year.
So it's really important to get get input from different age groups that know people who are alumni and that have a great passion. They're in environmental science because they went to the school forest. We know a lot of people that have really been impacted by that. So if you can share their names with us, that would be great. We'd love to talk to
Well,
them.
perhaps they're not, huge into environmental science, but what they are into, they can see a fit here. They really are into technology and IT, and they can see a fit for this, like Jim talked about, or whatever the case may be. Or they can see how their segment of the community could use this new building, not just for the pre-K through 12 education, but have it be a facility that they could use in the evenings or on the weekends or things like that. So,
Jerry, that's where my head went when I look at this. The one thing that stands out to me is, okay, if you're going to go out there, you're going to need, if you're going to go out for a campaign, right, you need sponsors from across the spectrum. Part of those are going to be corporate.
yeah.
I mean, to me, if you marry this up with, hey, you know what, you can have a meeting room here,
Right.
For a retreat, because I'll tell you firsthand, people get sick and tired of sitting in the same conference room all day long. You bring clients in from all over the country. I mean, to me, that is a natural marketing.
You've got that look out the front window at the river.
Absolutely.
You've got a trail that you can take a walk on during your lunch break. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
it'd be hugely popular.
Yeah, it's kind of a slam dunk,
Right.
From that standpoint. So I don't know what would need to be considered in the planning.
Well,
but
if
I
you look
think
back
part
at
of the
that floor
feedback.
plan,
We haven't really talked about it, and we've also been very, we want to be sensitive to the Wausau School District and naming rights. And perhaps we look, I think sponsors might be something where we sponsor the deer tail room or the.
Sure. Yeah, all I'm saying is that
Wild turkey
when in the design, right, be big enough, be flexible enough. I mean, what if it was designed where someone could rent it for a wedding reception on a Saturday night? I don't know. I mean,
No alcohol, that's the problem. I mean,
well, whatever.
yeah, I know.
I'm
I
just throwing
just,
out ideas to say.
There are more weddings that are going.
yeah, but we talked about that, right, Jerry? That,
yes, that has been a question people have asked in the past, and that's always been the deal breaker, was not even beer and not even.
Right.
Sorry,
even.
this
So yeah, I mean, but
property
if you're
had-
gonna do something, right, I mean, let's not limit ourselves right out of the gate, think big and then scale
Yeah,
down.
I agree with that. That is why the kitchenette is where it is and set up how it is, because when Dr. Williams was here, that was part of her question as well, was, if we are gonna bring people in and allow them to use this on the weekend, can we have something more than just Nesco roasters plugged in on the cart over by the wall? Can we have a place where they can use an oven like you'd have in your home, a microwave, a dishwasher like you'd have in your home, not the ones that we use for serving our students with food services, because that falls under a whole different realm of codes and state laws and so forth, but something where they could come in and be able to serve some food and have a place to keep their beverages refrigerated and so forth. Yeah, and that classroom in the upper right-hand corner would have access to that kitchen. So that was our thinking, was that would be an area where we could have tables and chairs and it could be set up for dining, but then they could move into other areas for meeting spaces and so forth.
Would this address our capacity issue too, relative to like the whole sixth grade overnight thing?
Not for housing.
Right.
That's something
That's
we're calling
totally-
Phase B or.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that would be, you know, as long as you brought it up, what I would be looking at as the follow-up to this first part. In my heart, I think we need to have this in order to justify having a program where not only sixth graders, but maybe additional kids could come out for overnight experiences. But if we're gonna do that, we need to look at rebuilding how we house those kids.
Right.
So that we can supervise them, provide them a safe environment much more reliably and consistently than we've been able to do with our current model utilizing high school kids as our TAs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who stays overnight now? Do fifth graders stay overnight?
Fifth and sixth have through this school
Okay.
year. In the fall, we're gonna change it to sixth graders will be coming for extended days, but then going home in the evening, sleeping at home, coming back the next day for another extended day. Fifth graders will continue to stay as they have historically, and my hope and my justification there is if I reduce the number of overnights that I need to staff by more than 50%,
Right.
I can really be selective and get the best of the high school kids to staff those nights.
I think another group that you want to make sure you tap into are all of the people that experienced the school forest program when they went through the school district and have really great feelings about it. Their donations may not be large, but there are
A lot of them,
thousands and
right.
thousands of
Oh, I
them,
know,
and they
it's
have
thousands, yeah.
really good feelings about their experience.
I think, you know, we kind of build this, this is not our case statement, but there's, you see like the plantation of flowers and everybody's played tug of war in the pictures and, you know, we've all had a really good experience there. Mine was, I got a marksmanship award for target shooting in middle school, and I thought I was a really good target shooter, and I was so proud because I got this. And so for years, I thought I was really good shooting. And then when I got married, my husband took me out to the shooting range, and I couldn't shoot at all. So at least all those years, I felt. But so I think a lot of people have told me stories already, also that have that. Just going backwards a little bit, just to give you an idea. Most people think that to raise money, you go to foundations to ask for money. But really, in a good balance in a campaign is to have 75% come from individuals, 20% from, I'm not having this up in my head, but about 20% for corporate and 11% from foundations. So, if, you know, I think for us, instead of, people are going to foundations quite a bit, but we really want to make sure that we're building a relationship with individuals. And another positive thing is those are the people down the road that'll do plan giving. They'll leave us estate gifts to the Wausau School Foundation. And so I think, you know, building up that base of individuals, supporters is going to be important.
You've probably already thought of this, but a recent campaign that was really successful was the therapy pool at North Central Healthcare, and I bet you can learn a lot of tips from that group that organized that.
Sure. They've
You know,
already
things
walked
that they
the
did
issues,
and-
and it's a great suggestion. So back to the budget, you can see what we have right now. The second part of why I'm here tonight is to ask you if we need to spend money in the near future to pay for permits, to get construction drawings, to, you know, whatever the case may be, we have to have an avenue to start to access some of this money in order to move the project forward. So Bob, if you wouldn't mind helping with that part.
Sure. You've heard this topic come up in a lot of operations meetings and board meetings, and you knew we were talking about it, but tonight we're definitively saying that the foundation is gonna be going out to the community, and we wanted you to hear that first. So you're not surprised when the foundation starts asking for funds. Furthermore, as Jerry mentioned, we have to access some of that money that, while we were earning it, we talked about the money being designated for this purpose. Sold some timber, we sold some properties that we're no longer using. We have $600,000 approximately that's available at least for the school forest. we need to invest some of that money. And we're very careful to invest it in plans and drawings and permits and things that are not going to be abandoned if the funding doesn't come along for a little while, or it ends up needing to be more referendum balanced than private donations. So we're asking your permission to access $50,000 of the $634,000 for just that. Investing in developing some designs and going through some permitting process and things of that nature. With architects and engineers and DNR, of course, they're going to want to have their say being the responsibility. So it's a pretty small amount compared to the ultimate investment, especially considering as a school district, that investment may not need to even come from us. It may come from private donations. So that's what we're asking from you tonight with, I believe it's in the memo that Jerry wrote at the bottom, there's an action that we're proposing.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on with the motion?
Very nice presentation, Jerry and Paula, very thorough, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry it took so long. You told me 10 minutes.
I think that's all it's been, yeah.
Yeah, I apologize if I moved ahead with my question.
No,
I mean, it's,
please do.
well, it felt like I was kind of putting the cart before the horse. If we need to get to that amount, how long is that going to take? But of course, this is just wonderful. One question I do have is, in your discussions for fundraising, have you considered reaching out to some of the tribes? I know that at least in first grade, my recollection just as a parent is that the first graders have the education component at the, what I don't know if you call it the Native American village. So that might be something to consider.
That's a great idea.
Specifically, I would suggest Ho-Chunk Nation, Forest County, Potawatomi, Menominee, and Ojibwe. And I'm happy to speak further on this at any time as well. But you might also want to, if you do reach out, offer the opportunity to come and see the Native American village and offer additional input. I know that.
And maybe also offer them the opportunity to make suggestions for the interior design, and one of those classrooms might be a inclement weather place for that lesson as well. Yeah, good suggestion.
So I do think there's an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions or comments, seeking a motion to authorize the use of funds designated for school forest capital improvements for preliminary design of the school forest lodge, including site development, building plans, marketing materials, and investigating environmental implications or impediments in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
It's a really one, that one.
Hope to see that soon.
Thank you very much.
The next one, I need to lower the prices.
All right. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 4. This is meal price recommendations for the 2019-2020 academic year.
Okay, hi, I'm Karen Fox, the Nutrition Services Director. So every year we have to complete the paid lunch equity tool that's provided by the USDA. We don't have a whole lot of choice, that is a requirement. So the 10 cent, you've seen the paperwork in your board books, the 10 cent increase would go toward each, the elementary, the middle school, and the high school lunch prices, which would bring us up to the weighted pricing average that is required by this paid lunch equity tool. All other prices, the milk purchased by the carton and the staff and visitor along with the breakfast would all remain the same. So, and we've been fortunate because we haven't had to increase in the last couple of years. So hopefully if we make this increase this year, maybe we'll be good for a couple of years. So that's what I'm asking for the fall, is that we're able to implement these pricing.
Karen, one of the things that I was wondering about is why the staff isn't increasing, but the student costs are.
So the staff meal is still within a range where it's not required. We're still able to provide the food costs and the labor costs is still underneath that level. I would assume that that will change in the upcoming years.
Well, I make a motion to recommend to the Board of Education an overhaul price increase of 10 cents for lunch for the 2019-2020 school year.
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, next on the agenda is the recommendation for the preliminary 2019-2020 budget.
Right, thank you. I have a brief slideshow in board book that you can follow along with if you'd like. Most of the interesting information that I'm going to share with you tonight has been shared by way of the original assumptions that were made, that we used to build the budget, and the adjustments to those assumptions, which were part of the reconciliation plan approved only a week ago, actually. So together, the assumptions that you've participated in building throughout the winter and the reconciliation plan that you approved last week, Monday, together make up the budget at this point. And we need a budget passed by July 1, when our fiscal year starts. And the only way to do that is to put something like this in front of you tonight, have official board approval in June, and we have a budget in place, at least for the start of the fiscal year. You'll see this calendar and a lot of things that I present over the next, 3 or 4 months. And the way it's organized, I have them grouped in pairs, and you already know that your operations committee meeting comes with a board meeting every time, and they're grouped together. Tonight, we're doing this committee approval of the initial budget, and then we'll take board approval of the same. Then we'll wait a little while, we'll develop what we're gonna share with the community, saying this is the date of the annual meeting and here's the budget that we're gonna share. So if you think about that, we have to back up from the annual meeting about a month and a half to get you as a committee and then ultimately as a board to say to the community, this is what our budget's gonna look like when you see our annual meeting. And a lot of that is just driven by compliance. So right around, exactly August 26th, we'll share the equalized value estimates, set the annual meeting date, and recommend the budget and tax levy that the constituents will see at their annual meeting. That annual meeting will happen September 23rd, if that's what's approved, of course. And it comes in pairs and it culminates with October 28th. You as a board have the authority to accept what the electorate told you. Kind of a odd thing with the law, or you can go on your own, right? And you will almost have to go on your own because some data isn't revealed until after the annual meeting. Like the September counts and the equalization aid and some of those things. So if you've been through this before, we take it slow. We've taken it pretty slowly to this point with the assumptions and the reconciliation plan, and we're asking you to approve part of it tonight. As I mentioned, the assumptions are built in. You saw them January 28th at Education Operations, and the reconciliation plan, which you just approved a week ago, is built into the budget. Probably one of the biggest parts of the budget, well, it is the biggest part, it's the salary that we pay all of our employees. And here's just a historical look at what that salary has been. Later tonight, you're actually going to get a chance to take action on some of the salary increases. They're separated by group, and they're compared to the Consumer Price Index for that year, which, by the way, in the current cycle is 2.44%. The gray is the available revenue, and that available revenue is through per pupil categorical aid and the revenue limit put together. And that increase for this year is about 1.92%. So our available revenue is going up 1.92%. And our salary increases for the 3 different groups, green being teachers, the tan color or peach being the non-certified staff, and the purple or blue is administrative. Those are 248, 248, 248. So you realize the kind of things that we need to hold steady in the budget, or maybe even reduce in the budget, for revenue to go up 1.92, but those salary increases to be 2.48. I think we've done a great job historically of finding money in our budget to pay for salary and wage increases. you've at least heard that verbalized before. 2.48 shouldn't come as a surprise. We talked about it a week ago. We also talked about it at our April Operations Committee meeting, and you get a chance to take action on that again later tonight. I point that out because it's such a large part of our budget. This is to show you that our budget's going to change. There are a lot of factors that are up in the air right now. We started off with a reconciliation target of $322,000 negative. We needed to balance $322,000. And you did that with the reconciliation plan that you passed. And we're essentially balanced right now. We're out of balance by $432, really balanced, right? We need to consider the September 3rd Friday pupil count, and that oftentimes results in more or less revenue. The revenue limit is based on number of students, and when you're in declining enrollment, to be honest, it doesn't matter as much because you get to recapture that with these hold harmless clauses. Okay, but sometimes when you're in increasing enrollment, that's a big deal, and you don't know about that number until the 3rd Friday in September. But this one could actually move the budget. The good news is the other ones don't necessarily move the budget, but they move the mill rate. Think about the next one, the prior year open enrollment exemption. An exemption is an increase in the revenue limit that you're allowed to tax for. So the DPI calculates in the middle of October what the prior year open enrollment exemption is. Doesn't affect our budget necessarily, but it does sometimes allow us to tax a little bit more, so it does impact our mill rate. The very next one, the private voucher revenue limit exemption. We know from past history this has caught us off guard once in a while. It went from $600,000 to $1 million because we don't know how many students in our district are going to access private vouchers. We find out in the middle of October. It doesn't hurt the budget that we're in the midst of as much as it hurts our mill rate because we get an exemption for that also. So we tax additionally for it. And you'll probably hear my line again this year. We get the enjoyment of taxing for it, but we don't get the enjoyment of spending any of it, right? So that happens each year in the middle of October. It doesn't really affect our budget. We don't have to cut anything because of it, but we do have to tax more than we wanted to. District equalization aid, that just affects the balance between how much we tax and how much is in aid. Again, it affects the mill rate. And then that equalized value certification, we've been pretty accurate on that the last few years. We make a projection that you see in the middle of summer, and it gets revealed in October, and we're usually not that far off. That's, again, just a mill rate number. It's not a budget number. Does everybody understand that difference? It's just how much we have to tax, not necessarily how much we spend. So all of those things are going to happen yet between now and the end of October. Above, you see what our original budget was when we did our projection model. Those numbers, and maybe they're not committed to memory, but maybe you recognize one of them, 322,000 negative. When we issued our projection model in January, that was what we had to reduce. And we worked through a lot of the winter to reduce that. So on the bottom, what you see is the budget that you're asked to approve tonight. It's out of balance by $432, excuse me. Another big one, especially because it's in the news lately, and we're maybe asking you to reach out to your legislators to protect the per pupil categorical aid for special ed. $10 million transferred out of Fund 10 into Fund 27 to cover a shortage in Fund 27 that they don't get for funds that are specifically for special ed. $10 million transferred from Fund 10 into Fund 27. And if you notice a little bit of a difference in that transfer, the Fund 10 transfer out also includes some money that we transfer out of Fund 10 to pay for debt retirement as a result of energy efficiency work. If we save $42,000 in utility costs, we're supposed to transfer that, not supposed to, we must transfer that out and use that for debt retirement. So that's why those two transfer numbers don't match exactly. With that, this is the action that we would ask of you to approve the different budgets. They're all listed separately in your memo, but this is the actual motion. Had questions, but maybe I'll leave this one up on the screen for questions.
Any questions for Bob?
I have one about hold harmless.
How long?
we've been able to use hold harmless.
Well, the thing with hold harmless is you get a 3-year rolling average for the revenue limit, right? So in the year your enrollment doesn't go down, it doesn't hurt you. But the minute that becomes the second year, it does hurt you. So you get hurt more than you realize for enrollment going down, but you don't get hurt that year. So this year, we could perhaps be hurt by last year, and actually the year prior to that. So that's why when you're in declining enrollment, you can go into September with confidence that you know what your revenue limit's gonna be. Because the hurt from last year is already built in. And the hurt from this year, you're held harmless to. So that's one of the things that they're looking at the state level to maybe dampen that impact or make it less volatile for schools that are in declining enrollment, because I think about 2/3 of the school districts in Wisconsin are in declining enrollment.
So with special ed, moving from that then to special ed, are we getting any indication where we are with the budget, or the budget's going to be carried from last year to this year for the state?
I heard, well, our lobbyist, John Forrester, right, he's probably my best conduit to people that are actually in the Capitol. And I talk to John on a pretty regular basis. I serve on a committee with him. He said to me on Thursday that it's best to project 27.5% categorical aid reimbursement this year and 30 in year 2. That's what he's recommending, and that's exactly where we're at right now in our assumptions. Remember, we talked about maybe going up to 30 this year, because that's what's in the budget currently. I just reached out to a few lawmakers today, asking them to advocate for us, and 30 this year instead of the 27.5, or at least 27.5. And I'll probably talk to a few more in the next couple of days. So that's what I'm hearing, 27.5, which is up from 27.5 or 24.5 currently. It's about $350,000 increase. So, you're welcome.
All right, not hearing any other questions, I'm seeking.
I have a statement. I'm not sure where I should put this in, but it relates to the budget, and I personally cannot approve a budget that does not bring all our employees up to the living wage. I'm aware that other districts choose to underpay their employees, but just because they choose to be bad actors doesn't give us license to do the same. I also cannot support administrative contracts that continue with a stipend meant to offset the cost of cell phones and data. We currently, in total, spend approximately $27,000 on this item for 50 administrators. This was instituted post-pagers because administrators were carrying a district phone as well as their personal phones, and by creating this stipend, we allowed the administrators to not be burdened with having to deal with 2 phones. The board was assured at the time that this cost of data, when the cost of data came down, as technology does, that this stipend would be removed. If I had known at the time that this would become permanent, I would have voted against it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Not hearing any, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board approval of the preliminary budgets as presented in order to proceed with 2019-20 expenditures committed to before final budgets are approved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstention?
I abstain.
Motion carries.
Point of order, Lance, you think we need to abstain on that one since we've already approved, or rather the committee has already approved the wage increases?
Well,
This is for the general budget.
yeah, I know that we know that a separate committee will be formed and that the teacher wages will be finalized outside of this, but until that's officially voted on, I just always think it looks better, since it's there as a placeholder, to abstain on it until that's officially decided.
Okay. Cassie, can you change mine to an abstention then?
And then once the separate committee meets with the teachers and that's officially voted on and it's no longer up in the air as a placeholder, then I feel like we can vote on the full budget.
Okay, is that okay to just change his vote, or should we redo the vote?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
You know, I'm just gonna redo the vote for precision purposes. All right, seeking a motion to recommend to the full board approval of the preliminary budgets as presented in order to proceed with 2019-20 expenditures committed to before final budgets are approved. This is the first.
So Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions?
Yes. Abstain.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda item, WIAA membership renewal for 2019-2020. That's Tom.
I'd like to bring forward the request to renew our membership with the WIAA. The official documents from the WIAA will not be sent out until the first week of June, but by bringing it forward tonight, we can then when the board meets that first time in June, we'll be able to approve it and sign the documents. The reason we can do that is, once again, this year there's no cost from the WIAA. So it is simply approval that our two high schools, our two middle schools will remain as part of the WIAA, and our charter schools will be affiliate members.
All right, any questions? All right, then I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education the approval of the continued support of the Wausau School District remaining a member of the WIAA for the 2019-2020 school year.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thanks, Tom. All right, next, agenda item 7. This is various group wage and salary increases. Tammy.
Hello, Board. I was here last week and did extensive talking with presentation of materials for our wage increases, so that's why you don't see anything in your board book. All those documents were there last week for TRL. So we're just simply presenting tonight, excuse me, the information that we're recommending for the 1920 base wage adjustment of 2.48%, and that's for the categories of the administrators, for the administrative and educational support group or the clerical group, the maintenance and custodial group, the school nutrition services group, and the municipal group.
Sorry.
Okay, any questions for Tammy? All right, hearing none, I'm seeking a motion to approve the 2019-2020 base wage adjustment of 2.48% for the administrative and educational support group, the maintenance and custodial group, school nutrition services group, and the municipal group as presented.
So moved.
Pardon me, Madam President. I'm not sure you included the administration in there. I think you may have read.
She got the script before we amended.
Yeah. So.
And the administration?
Yes. Yes, and that was an amendment today because it was an oversight.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to repeat this. Sorry to have to keep repeating motions tonight. Seeking a motion to approve the 2019-20 base wage adjustment of 2.48% for the administrative and educational support group, the maintenance and custodial group, school nutrition services group, the municipal group, and the administration as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, thank you, Tammy. Next agenda item is the employee handbook update.
We had one additional update that we wanted to bring to you for approval so that we can put this all together for our July 1st employee handbook, and that was about the personal appearance staff dress code. You can see in board book the changes. It's simply, we took out some words as related to what is appropriate dress attire, and it now is going to read that colored denim pants is an appropriate dress code, and with the last sentence being that staff may wear blue jeans that are in clean and good condition. Again, we're trying to be respectful of teachers and staff that are working in the school. They're working with students, they're on the floor, they're doing a lot of work, and jeans are the desired attire. We want to make sure that all of our staff are still dressed professionally. I think of it that your jeans is one thing and how you're dressed from the waist up stays the same. So we're not going to have a group of disheveled t-shirt wearing staff. We're just allowing them to wear jeans if they choose to do so. And we're bringing that forward as a new addition to the July 1st handbook.
Well, this is Mrs. Fuddy-Duddy, all right? And I sent Dr. Hiltz a note about this. I feel the teachers are professionals, and they should dress like professionals. And in my opinion, blue jeans are not professional attire. They're casual attire. And I was a first grade teacher for 36 years. And I only wore blue jeans on Spirit Day. And I feel that when you allow blue jeans, we have, unfortunately, some people that don't make good decisions. And then there's a problem with principals knowing when you say, hey, you know, those are pretty worn. I don't think you used good judgment. Or the principal who won't say anything. And I feel that, I'm just going to give you a couple examples. When Dr. Williams had this put in here, she said that oftentimes when she would go to the middle school and the high school, she couldn't tell who were the students and who were the teachers because many of them were dressed exactly like the students. There should be a difference. And I think most of our teachers dress very professional. The other day when I was getting some plants at the plant sale, the ag teacher had nice khaki pants on and a nice shirt. Well, yes, there was a lot of dirt everywhere and spilled plants, but he looked professional. And when I go and I get my hair done at Cost Cutters, and you can see I get it colored just perfectly. One day I said to one of the hairdressers, why are you wearing blue jeans today? And she said, once a month we're allowed to wear blue jeans because we give to our favorite charity. And it's a contribution of $5. If you choose not to do that $5, you just don't wear blue jeans. But we as a profession do not believe that wearing blue jeans makes us look professional. And so I shared with Dr. Hiltz that I'm old school, and just saying dress professional, that still leaves some people not dressing professional, but that's the administrator. And today I asked a principal about their feelings about it. They said they're a rule follower, and what they found out with the policy as it is some schools already don't follow this policy, and it causes problems with other schools that do follow the policy. But I feel that if the teachers and the staff in our district know that we expect them to dress professionally, and it doesn't include blue jeans, everybody gets the message. So that's my little speech about being professional and why I don't approve of taking this out.
You know, I was surprised when this came up because I guess I was thinking back to my days at Wausau West, and I can think of so many teachers that wore jeans, and it really, you know, I never had a perception as a student of any unprofessionalism. And so to hear the feedback when this was put in about teachers that you couldn't tell if they were a student or the teacher, I think that takes away from treating the teachers like the professionals they are. I personally like to give them the option, and especially if there are some schools that are not doing it and some are not following the rules and some that are, that really goes to a morale issue as well. So I guess that's my support is actually for this change.
We're just going to kill the corduroy market.
Big concern, thank you.
Jean to beat the dress code, remember? Yeah, I think we get, I don't think the board needs to be making decisions on this small of a matter. But two, I'd prefer to leave it up to the discretion of the teacher, and if a building principal sees a teacher is not dressing appropriately, then they can take that up on that level.
I agree with Teresa. I can see both sides of this. On the one hand, I see that we have a real respect issue with students, and when teachers differentiate themselves as professionals, that builds respect in the classroom. On the other hand, if you're with the kindergarten class and you're going out to the school forest, or you're a shop teacher, you kind of have to dress for what you're going to be doing that day. If your day ends and you get on a school bus and you're coaching until 10 o'clock at night, that's really different than if you have district level meetings. So I hate to define it by jeans or no jeans. I just think people should dress professionally for what they've got on their calendar for that day.
I recall 8th grade civics. John Mayer, Mr. Andy, you remember him? He had 3 suits, brown, green, and blue. And I will tell you that not one day did my respect level for him differentiate based on what color suit he had, right? Because some days he would come in and it was different. The respect to me, and I appreciate where you're coming from, but it really was generated by what came out of their mouth and what they represented. I didn't associate it myself. I didn't associate it with how they looked. And having a chance to reflect on this today and actually have some more conversation with some parents, frankly, that have students in the district, and I asked them about this. What do you think? And someone made a comment to me that I thought was interesting. They said, you know what, things are evolving. They said, I couldn't imagine myself going to church in anything but, corduroys and a jacket or something 10, 15 years ago. And he said, now, every time I go to church, I wear nothing but jeans. So it was just to me, it was an interesting dichotomy in terms of the evolution of where we're at society-wise. And I think that, I don't see an issue with this. I just want I want teachers to be comfortable. I care about what comes out of their mouth and what they're doing in front of the kids more than I do at the end of the day about what, if they have a Metallica shirt on or a Armani suit. I don't know.
Well,
That's just
and I just told you, I'm a fuddy-duddy, that I just feel that that's not being professional. And sure, you go to the school force, of course you wear a pair of blue jeans. I coached for 12 years. After school, I changed my clothes and put on my tennis gear. That's not hard. But I still feel teachers always say they want to be treated as professionals. And I just feel that you look professional. And in my eyes, blue jeans are not professional attire. And when I've been in church and have seen people in blue jeans, doesn't bother me. That's their choice. They're an adult. But how about short shorts? I'm thinking, oh my, you certainly don't have any respect for the house of God that you're entering, but that's not my business. But the school district is my business. And I've been just berated by a couple of people lately who are elderly, much older than I am, giving me lectures about the way they see kids walking to school and the way they're dressed. And I say to them, that's not my business. It's the high school and middle school principals that have that, they've got that latitude. And I said, they send kids home if they're not properly dressed, but they're just constantly telling me how disappointed they are of the way we let the kids dress. And I don't touch that. But I'm okay with whatever you decide, but I feel professional dress is not blue jeans.
Thanks, Teresa. Jeff, I really appreciate your comment about us even kind of weighing in on this. It does seem to be really in the details. And if we trust our teachers and we trust our principals to run the schools, I think that the principals can identify if they do see an issue of unprofessionalism.
And the question is whether the clothing is disruptive or not. And that of course could speak to the short shorts or rips or whatever.
Any other comments?
Also, Neola has a policy on professional dress. And since we're going with that company and we're looking at all of our policies, you can just link to the policy right in the handbook.
Does Everest allow jeans?
No. On Fridays.
On Fridays, okay.
And special fundraiser days that we were talking about, but in general, no.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of the blue jeans. I could see Fridays or on the special days or when it's directly related to what you're doing, like going to the school force. And as much as I love my blue jeans, I just don't think it's a professional look.
What I hear from teachers is they find this no blue jeans just an annoyance, just a harassment.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other comments? Okay, then I'm seeking a motion to approve revisions to the 2019-2020 Wausau School District Employee Handbook as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Do we have numbers? Do we need numbers on this?
We're going to need numbers.
Okay. All
Can
right.
they raise their hands?
All right, can you raise your hands? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
No one can say we're a rubber stamp.
Why we have an odd number.
And a few odd people.
And may I just add, thank you. That's exactly why we bring this to the board out of our employee handbook, because the employees do talk to our board, and we're glad they do. We want to be responsive to our employees and to our board, and so I appreciate the dialogue around the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, now we're moving on to agenda item 9, teacher compensation and professional development guidelines.
You gonna pull this?
What exactly do you want, the first or the second?
The first, please. So yeah, you, as Bob mentioned, there's 2 attachments, and frankly, it's hard to differentiate the 2, but if you could slide down to that graph, I'd like to start there, actually, before I get into the proposal. And this is, this graph, first of all, what it is the total expenditures by all districts in Wisconsin, the top 100 districts in Wisconsin, except Madison, Milwaukee, and they're just a anomaly, really, frankly, because of the size and whatnot. So do notice that the expenditures that are listed there are expenditures per student, so that does tend to remove the impact of school size to some extent. But I wanted to draw your attention, and actually, maybe what I'll do, slide down to the second one. As Bob and I were talking about this, we wanted to make this just a little bit larger. We sorted it by the size of the expense. And what you'll see is, so for instance, the largest expense for a school district is salaries. And just a brief explanation of what you're looking at. So if you look across the right on the salaries, you'll see a series of dots. You'll see a vertical line and then an orange dot. So that vertical line is the mean. That's the average amount that these school districts spend per pupil on employee salaries. The orange dot is Wausau. So we spend far more than the average school district on salaries. And if you go down one more expenditure line under health insurance, you'll see the same case is true. It was interesting, as Bob and I were talking about this, we were trying to choose what's the best group to share, about which to share this data. Is it our comparable group? And frankly, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if it was our peer group that we typically use. It didn't. I have a group that's between 6,000 and 12,000 enrollment. Frankly, it didn't matter. The Wausau School District spends far more than the average on salaries and in health insurance than most districts. And I bring that not to say whether we have a good compensation package or not. What I see is we invest a lot into our people, and yet we don't get the return in terms of staff morale from that. So that, to me, is just a classic strategic, that's a systems problem. We're investing and yet we're not getting our return. So I call to your attention that just gives us kind of the rationale for why we're even visiting this. And certainly before I was even hired here officially, and as I was hired, I heard about the concerns with the compensation model. So I just thought that was an interesting way to look at our investment.
I have a question. I was wondering, because we have all these neighborhood schools, so we have more administrators, does that affect where we are on?
Sure. This would be an impact of our staffing amounts. It would be a factor of seniority. It would be a factor of our compensation model in general. This is just a total expenditure. It's not isolating any one factor over another.
But if you have more buildings, you have more staff.
Correct. Yes. And I know Bob has shared that with you many times over the years. So this is just one more way to look at it. Other questions about that data, or okay? So you've had access to this. I won't read it. What I will tell you is that first of all, I want to start by saying the process used to create your compensation model was a good process. It had a lot of input. It gave a lot of time for consideration, and many of the outcomes from that process were sound. The recognition, the support for lifelong learning, the leadership, those are all good things. The problem, with all due respect, the flaw that seems to have brought us to where we are is the belief that a compensation model can change behaviors. You'll see a number of the research pieces on there. This is a literature review that I did recently, just this fall and winter. You can see some of the pieces that I drew conclusions from. I did also look at 2 school districts who have a performance-based compensation model, just to see if there was any impact on student achievement. I didn't include it here. I could certainly share that with you. There was no consistent growth, so no impact on student learning from the compensation model. I even called one of my ex-professors to say, hey, do you have any doctoral students who are doing work on teacher compensation? And he said, I did, but they quit because they couldn't find any research that would show really any impact. So that common sense notion that, hey, if you pay people more, they're going to perform, doesn't shake out in the research. So therefore, if you want to slide down, Bob, sorry. I would jump down to the goals. So what we would like to achieve, and these are conversations we've had over time and they're consistent with the strategic plan, is we want to get the greatest number of qualified candidates. We want to retain the highest number of qualified candidates. We want a compensation structure that's simple to understand, predictable, manageable, affordable, all these ables, right? Sustainable. We want teachers to feel valued through this model, and we want this model to support the strategic plan of improved work-life balance. Actually, all of our people goals are attract and retain. Let me stop there first of all and see if there are questions, concerns about the goals. All right, moving on. And of course, this is the first conversation we're having, so as this continues, we can continue to have that conversation. So the proposal, and again, I'm not bringing a salary schedule tonight. I really want to involve you fairly early in the foundational conversation about how we're going to compensate teachers moving forward. So the proposal would be remove the connection between professional learning and leadership from compensation. Movement on the salary structure would really be prompted by completion of a successful school year. If we offer you a contract, you'll move on the salary schedule. The expectation of lifelong learning, leadership, service, that's still really important and consistent with our values. I would move that into evaluation, and that's the second attachment that I had. I'll speak to that briefly in a moment. Number 4, we would recognize we would eliminate waiting periods. Currently we have, for affordability reasons, we've got some waiting periods. We'd like to create a pay structure that eliminates those. I think that's the last goal, isn't it? Is there anything below that? All right. Oh, there is one. And we had talked about, obviously we've got some teachers who have been working hard to leverage this model. I don't want to pull the rug out from them, so we've tossed around a few transition plans, but we'd like to give them enough notice where they could, complete some, if not all. I'm guessing not all of their plans, but some of their plans, and have enough time to kind of respond to this.
But you still are requiring a certain number of hours of professional development, right?
Yes, in terms of evaluation, yes, and that's the next attachment.
So I don't get how you account for that. If someone doesn't meet that goal, what happens?
Right. Can I hold that question until we talk about the evaluation piece? Yeah.
And then, when I looked at it, I thought, we want to think what's best for kids.
Yep.
And there, even though there isn't a correlation from the research you looked at, there is a correlation between student achievement and having a highly qualified teacher in front of them in the classroom.
Yes.
And part of that is the professional development piece.
Yes.
So I worry about taking that totally away from
Right.
the salary structure.
Okay. I would ask why, if you want to engage in that conversation.
Well, moving forward, a successful year would still afford you whatever the cell increase was.
Right.
Because you would move forward 1 year.
Right.
But if it wouldn't give you a raise beyond that.
Okay. Let me hold that thought for a second.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about
There
that
might
in
be
terms.
something I don't understand about
Yeah.
how this is structured.
Yeah, let's hold off that till we talk about the professional learning, that leadership piece, that evaluation model. And that's coming up, I think, pretty shortly. So that was the other questions or concerns, comments about the goals. Otherwise, the next piece is a timeline. And essentially, if you say, hey, we're good with the foundations, we're good with the goals, then we would continue to develop this, have further conversations with staff, come to you with a draft next fall for approval, and then implementation in the fall of 2020, so a year from next fall. And I've had conversations with a number of teachers say, can't we do it next year? We could, but I don't feel confident that this has had enough, time to discuss, review. Matter of fact, in the next attachment, you'll see there's a number of questions that are pretty important that we have to visit before we would move forward. Otherwise, timeline, goals.
I just wanted to say I'm very glad that we're having this discussion for a new compensation model, and I appreciate that you're being cautious too, because even that the student or the teachers that are trying to move right now and trying to figure out their transition plan.
Yep.
And what that's going to take, we certainly don't want to pull the rug out from under them. And so I feel it's unfortunate if teachers are hopeful, but this is really the safe route, is to take that time.
Yeah, thank you.
My only question would be that for those people that are on the program moving forward this year, now you change next year, are they feeling like they should have waited before they put all the work into whatever they had to do for this program?
Yeah.
Are they going to feel like, geez, all that work and I didn't get the benefit really as I would have gotten it next year?
Right. So we are looking at, I've been working with the Ed Department and Bob and others about, where are people, who are the people who are really leveraging this model? How much time do they need to kind of finish their plan? And how long can we afford to wait, right? And do we allow people to transition on, a few this year, a few, it's a fairly deep analysis. We're trying to be very cognizant of individual needs as well as make this an affordable transition for the district. So
Anytime you pick a deadline, there's going to be people on either side of
Yep.
that deadline.
yeah, we
That's
want to
just-
try and capture as many as we can.
Yeah.
How about if we switch to the next attachment, if you wouldn't mind, Bob? Because I think this might answer some of your questions, Beth. So I wasn't planning on looking at the evaluation model, but as the research kind of took me where it took me, and the conversations with people kind of emerged into that compensation model, that more simplified compensation model, I really found a lot of value in the work that people did around the professional learning and the leadership, that service, that model. And so developed into this proposal. So essentially and the research base, by the way, is the same. You'll see some of the citations at the bottom. Again, we've got a number of strategic plan, whole child goals that we would support with this work. But essentially, what I envision with this change, I was a principal for a long time myself, and even as a superintendent, I've evaluated a number of people, and the value of an evaluation is the conversation, the understanding of people's personal and professional growth goals, where they want to go, what their strengths are, where their needs are. And what I envision is taking some requirement of combination of professional learning and some leadership and some service, and incorporating that right into the evaluation. So I think, Bob, if you could slide down to sure, how about right there? So for instance, under learning, it could be graduate level coursework, as it is now. It could be the academies. Mr. Nyman and the Ed Department and I have had some conversations about where that might go. Workshops and other principal-approved professional learning opportunities. This would roll into the evaluation process, so there's some approvals of the supervisor. There was some flexibility there. And I'll talk about some good and bad associated with that. Leading could be, if someone wants to lead an academy course, or if they want to be a new teacher mentor, again, other principal-approved activities. And then service, I'm interested in recognizing the value and the time of athletic coaching and co-curricular advising. I see that as a service. They certainly get paid for it, but it's still a service. And again, I think a school district committee, again, or other principal approved. So those would be kind of the activities that that I've got in mind. Why don't I stop there? I'm seeing that people might have questions so far.
The one that I have a concern about is when we're recognizing that as professional development, but we're also paying someone.
Right.
And for other opportunities, we're not.
Correct. Yeah, these are 3 different categories.
Would it be a different mix for different people?
Yes.
I heard you saying new teachers would have a different mix of those categories than veteran teachers may have.
Yeah, what I would propose, and in here I included a requirement of 40 hours. Obviously decreased from our current 50. I understand that a neighbor to our near us has a 30-hour, and that's certainly under consideration as well. But if maybe, Bob, if you could slide down to
Keith,
those
could I just-
differentiated. Sure.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but just on the service, is teaching in G2M something you might consider? Sometimes some of the schools really struggle to find G2M teachers.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's parent volunteers or community volunteers. A lot of times it is teachers, but they might have more turnout that way.
Absolutely. And I should say, maybe now is a good time to mention, in all 3 of those categories, those are just suggestions. Sure. When I shared this with the principals, one of their concerns was, wow, if I'm left to principal approval, what if I approve something and the principal in the building next to me does not? That sets up some equity issues, some politics, and we don't want to. So we would have a pretty extensive conversation about what those 3 categories looks like, what we would approve. Will there always be a black and white? No, but we could certainly. We could have a nice rich conversation about what kinds of activities would fit into different categories.
I have a couple of concerns about, and this, after being on the compensation committee the last 2 years, we went round and round with athletic coaching. All right, now at the high school and somewhat at the middle school, they get percentage. Head coaches at the high school get 10% of their salary.
Right.
Now, that teacher at Red Mountain School that's running the running club on Monday and Thursday gets a very small stipend, but it's something the kids really enjoy.
Right.
Now, I'm looking at the person who gets 10%. I think that's very generous. And then what we were talking about is when we talked about those 40 hours, it got kind of hairy because they said, okay, when I'm doing, let's say, concussion study,
right?
Okay, then I should be able to count that as some of my 40 hours, like maybe I put in 10 hours. I totally agree with that.
Right.
But I'm not in favor of them getting extra compensation just for coaching. But in that 40 hours, if they do things to enhance their coaching and that counts in their 40 hours, I'm okay with that.
Right.
But I'm not okay with them just getting extra money because they're doing a service for the district.
Okay.
That's their choice. They like coaching, they like doing that, but and I had trouble with department heads too. And I was the minority where department heads, depending on the number of people in their department, depends on what they get as an increase in salary. Now, if just being department head and they get 6%, I don't know what it is. Okay, but then if they, as leaders, study about how to get people to engage kids from poverty, and that's part of their 40 hours, and that's part of their leadership plan, that's great. But just having on their plan that they're department head, they're already paid for that. So those are discussions I would have to better understand.
Yeah, yep. I appreciate that. And I think a tough change in mindset for those of you who've been living this for many years is at this point, this would not lead to additional compensation, right? So let's take your example of a head coach. So they're paid for that time. What I would envision is, so let's say that Trisha's a coach and I'm evaluating her. When we sit down for our evaluation, she's going to have a PPG and an SLO. Those things would all be aligned.
You have to tell me what those mean.
Professional performance goal and student learning objective. Okay? That's part of the evaluation process. Okay? What this would add is further conversation about, so what have you done around professional learning, and there would be some method to capture this information. So I would know ahead of time. So I'd sit down with Trish and I'd say, so here's your SLO, here's your PPG, where is this all going? I see that you are advising the FFA. I see that you're also coaching this sport. It's really more a comprehensive look at how they are growing and or being of service to kids, the district, right? It's really more a comprehensive look at that. Wouldn't impact their compensation at all. So let me stop there for a second.
Well, I think our coaching is always better when we have teachers do that, because they develop those relationships with kids that go into the classroom. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
We want to do things to encourage teachers to be coaches and to be doing extra activities if they can. And the other thing that I really like is opening up the opportunities for all kinds of different professional development geared toward the individual and what's going to move them forward. It felt like we were a little bit narrow in what we counted, and I think opening that up so that it's more individualized learning is a step in the right direction.
Thanks for that feedback. And I think we're more able to be flexible because now it's not tied to compensation, right? Because
that's a hard concept for me.
Yep.
But I
yeah,
might
because
get
you live
there.
it in both worlds. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I would be supportive of having these hours count whether they're during the contract day or not. So that would also be something you'd have to wrap your head around, because that's a big change for you. Having lived in this world, for many years. But again, I'm thinking about what's the goal, and the goal is, as you've already mentioned, our goal is professional learning, professional growth, become a better teacher, support kids, be of service to the district through committees or whatever that service might be. Does it matter if it's done during the day or outside of the contract time? Especially now, if we're not tying it to compensation, now we don't have a double dipping. It's really just about growth and service.
Keith, I really do like the recognizing athletic coaching within the service category. I know, Teresa, you're saying that coaches do it. I know you used to coach girls tennis at West, but they're long hours on top of the teaching day. I mean, you know that firsthand. I think back to my coach, we had 6 a.m. practices. We had competition season. we had, there's a lot that she put in on top of it, being a teacher for the district.
Weekends,
And
overnight, yeah.
So if we can recognize that in some capacity, I think that's really excellent.
I'm going to piggyback on it, since I'm listening to Ms. Martin, Ms. Miles, and now your comment as well. Those long hours, we may be compensating the coaches. You start getting into all the other things that add to coaching, to leadership. We were talking about professional development of teachers. Well, professional development of the teacher after school, before school, the coach, concussion protocols, all of these different things that coaches in the contact sports, the collision sports, have to be dealing with. Those are over and above what they're doing just with the students. And now you start bringing in helping them become leaders of young women, young men. That's another great area that they're being developed in. And unfortunately, we do not have all of our teachers as coaches, all of our coaches as teachers. Unfortunately, that's not the game anymore. You've got to find others. And so how can we help develop them as well? And I think this plays into that whole idea of developing the total person, the total teacher, the total coach, because coaching is teaching and teaching is coaching. So I like what you're saying about the expectation of professional development. That's incorporating it, and it's incorporating the time that they have to really go over and above. Just my 2 cents.
I think summer school should be included in this too, because we really need our teachers that are here in the district to be leading our summer school program for real help to students. They know the kids. They know where to start them.
They can move them forward.
Yeah, they can move them forward. And I think that that's another service to the district that so many teachers are willing to do.
I just like the fact that it almost mandates, what a concept, a dialogue between the principal and the teacher, rather than this artificial check the box thing. Did I do this by this time and not this by that time, and then that determines how I make my way through the maze. This sits down and can say, you're going to recognize someone, and I can say it's very similar to what happens in the private sector, so to speak. You can recognize somebody for organizing a juvenile diabetes fundraiser in Hartford, Connecticut, just as much as you can, something that's happening here, because it's all part of their growth. It develops compassion, etc. And you're really giving people the opportunity to grow in multiple areas, not something that we have predefined that we think is best for everyone.
I would agree. I would say, though, that the conversation piece that's built into the educator effectiveness now that's already there. We would just be adding to it.
I would say that.
Sure. Yeah.
So the compensation model we have now, there have been people who have figured out how to leverage that to their advantage. So we've always had to put some checks in there and balance things out. Will there be people, and I'm sure there will be, that can say, okay, I know how this game is played, and I can do it between 7:15 and 3:15 without putting in any extra hours?
There could be. There definitely could be. And maybe, if you wouldn't mind.
See, I don't mind if they do it during the school day, if
slide
then
up
they're
a little
doing
bit.
other work outside of the school day.
Yeah.
What time of day doesn't bother me?
There's 4 questions, and these are just 4. One that needs some attention, and it kind of leads off of what you said, Beth. So number 1, how do we ensure equity and access to professional learning, leading and service? So, for instance, one of the conversations we've had is because right now we know that about half of our teachers really have embraced this model and are moving. There's another half that really haven't. So we're going to increase the amount of professional learning that's going on, at least that's recognized by the model. And we know there's some that hasn't been. But with that realization, HR has started to look at how many days of substitutes do we currently have? How many days might we project this would increase? Do we have that kind of capacity? What's the budget impact on that? So we've got some rough numbers, but nothing solid. But that's one. Do we have enough opportunities for people to meet these requirements that we're putting out there. Coupled pretty closely to that is the any legal risk, right? Do we open up the district to any legal risk when we start making these requirements, allowing it potentially during the day? What if not everybody can go during the day? So there's all sorts of questions we need to look at from the legal aspect as well. The principal approval piece, I mentioned that briefly. What we would do is we'd sit down with staff and principals. So this, we would come to some sort of a rubric. Here's what we would approve. Here's what we wouldn't, and where's that gray area? But we would want to have a lot of consistency and equity around that. And I've already kind of talked to the teaching capacity.
The one thing too, and Beth, I hear your concern about that. Somebody going to, kind of figure out the system. I think that there's also probably a greater risk in trying to orchestrate a system that's going to prevent all of that, so to speak.
I hear you there.
Just because, you're going to have, let's say it's 5-10% of people are going to figure out how to game it. Great, if they're going to try to do that in every system, and to me, the more restricted you get, then you're creating something that's not going to work for the people that are really trying to leverage it,
It may come up in the one-on-one conversations in their evaluation.
Right. I was going to say, we want to try and create systems that support our high flyers, and allow them to really bloom, as opposed to trying to plan for the lowest common denominator.
Right.
Hopefully that gets worked out. The idea would be that gets worked out through the evaluation process.
And if you manage to the exception, you're going to be here all day.
Yep. Yeah.
Can people bank hours? So let's say you have a summer where you take 2 graduate classes. Can you bank those hours for the next year, or do you start over at square one every year? Because that allows some flexibility. If you can bank those hours so that when you have more availability, or when you have a 3-credit graduate class, you're taking advantage of all of those, and it's not a use it or lose it kind of a deal.
Like the 3-year rolling average.
Yeah. I don't know.
So if you have a family emergency too.
Yeah.
Or you just bank them, and then you have something going on, and
Or
you're
a certain
covered.
amount or something. Yeah, that would be a detail we could look at.
At this point in time, how many times can a teacher put in to move forward? Every year? Every other year?
On the compensation model?
On the compensation model.
Every year.
Every year. Well, if you had 50% of our teachers putting in every year, that balloons the budget considerably.
Bob can certainly speak to that.
That's all we talk about.
Yeah.
Really. That's all we talk about.
Yeah, every time I see Bob. So how about that compensation? No, sorry.
We do have, as you alluded to earlier, we have barriers in the model. I don't know, somebody over there mentioned it. And those barriers exist because you just can't afford any dollar amount that's unlimited. It's got to have limits, it's got to have ceilings, it's got to have barriers, and some people are bumping against those barriers. Some are more more barriers than others. Some are smaller barriers, walls and floors and ceilings. And some of the language that we've adopted, if we started to eliminate those barriers, you're right. I think about that a lot, and that's one of the ABLEs. That's the sustainable. And we talk about this half a dozen times a week, I think, about what can we do to mitigate this, or this is a great idea, but it's even better if we do this.
So does pulling these apart make it easier to budget for? Because it's more predictable where everyone's going to move?
Yes.
I mean, your staff changes a little bit. New people come in and people retire or leave.
Let's put it this way, the mix between the different types of increases wouldn't be so hard to nail down. Right now, think about what you initially approved, 2.48%, yet to be maybe discussed, right?
Right.
You only approved it as part of the budget, that's all. How much of that is for tier advancement? How much of that is for vertical movement? How much of that is for horizontal movement? How much is a one-time expense for the bonus paid to tier 4 advancers? That mix gets pretty difficult sometimes to peg, especially during the early years, which we are still in the middle of, the early years of the model as it's developing. we're in search of a model that doesn't have that crazy dynamic, where you can more anticipate maybe 99% of the teachers are going to do this, and a half might not.
Also makes it more fair. Everybody gets a raise that's pretty similar.
But there will still need to be barriers. There still need to be ceilings that people bump into if you perhaps don't get a master's degree.
Right.
If you never intend to get a master's degree, maybe you go to here. And if you get a master's degree, you go to here. And if you get something else, you bust through that ceiling and you go to here. There will have to be some of those barriers put in place, or else it real quickly, you'll discover it gets unaffordable.
And I'm sure you two have been talking about this, and I know I've talked about it many times in the past, about the fact that, you know, before Act 10, you had a better handle on projection for salaries than what you do now, because you had a step and lane where you knew where people were going to be, and you had an understanding of how many people were going on for a master's degree and whether they're going to be sliding over or not. With these models that are being created, if you don't put some limitations on there, you're going to have some years where it's going to blow the budget, the salary budget. And I'm looking at the salary where we are right now, taking a look at in comparison to other districts, you know, we're paying very well. Now, there are a lot of elements that play in that. Kind of what I heard you say before, there are more schools here, you have more administration, things of that fashion. But I don't want to advise you on anything, in the fact that, you know, I'm sure you're talking about it, but it is important so that you have a control of your budget, our budget, and how we move forward. But yet, giving teachers the opportunity, if they're going to be using, you know, the professional development and going for that, we don't want to discourage that. We want to encourage.
Perhaps just to give you comfort in some things that we're doing so you know it is under control, we have in the last 5 years picked a percentage that the board approves that will cover all the movements plus. And the residual always went to the percent per grid. So far, we've been very successful in picking a percent that's bigger than the movement will consume. Then you distribute the dollars based on movement, and the residual went to per cell. So it really was controllable. Since we've started this, we've not gone a nickel over what the board approved at about this time of year. So every time we have that safeguard in place where the residual goes to the grid, and something in the future would hopefully follow that same general rule of movement costs so much, and then there's some extra that goes to increase per cell amounts. Otherwise, that starting salary is going to be uncompetitive real quickly. And the top salary won't be competitive either. So we want to protect some of that money going to the per cell increase. So that's how we've managed that.
I think there's details that we have to work out, of course, but I'm absolutely thrilled that we're talking about this issue, because I'm finishing my 4th year on the board, and this has been the #1 issue. It's a morale killer. It's just, I mean,
for some. Others,
yes.
Others are doing well.
For a small percentage, it works out well, but I think that going to something a little bit different is a step in the right direction, a big step in the right direction.
Thank you.
I agree with you totally. The time I've been on the board, there's been more frustration about that model than I can believe, and I do think it's really important that we're reviewing it and looking at it.
Thank you. The last concept, and we don't have to talk about it too much, but there was some differentiated at the bottom, some differentiated requirements potentially. And again, this is really just created out of recognition. You know, when you've got a teacher with a lot of experience, you know, they have a lot to offer. And in the research, it talks about one of the largest benefits of teachers with experience is their ability to lead, to mentor. So that's really just recognizing that. On the other end, the educators with less than 3 years of experience, there's now a DPI requirement for a 3-year mentor program. One proposal that we thought about was that mentor program could be significantly supported through the academy model, where we would create or amend some of our academy offerings that new teachers in particular would be interested in, and we would allow them to do those during the day to meet this requirement. One, it supports their professional growth. Two, it recognizes that they are, and oftentimes, working really hard just to maintain. And so this would give them a little bit of relief and not add the time in their first 3 years when they're just kind of, getting their feet underneath them, learning how to be a professional educator. So it's really offered more as a service and a recognition of that time frame of their career. I don't know if that differentiation, if you have any reaction to that.
Well, I do have a question for you, Keith, in relation to this mentor experience. Would mentors be considered different than coaches, not athletic coaches, but the actual coaches in the classrooms? Because one thing that came up last year, just before you joined us, was a discussion about how coaches for teachers were proven to be the most effective. I can't think of exactly what it was, but it was just, we were
instructional
thinking,
coaches.
yes,
Right.
and we were, why don't we have those? Why aren't we using those? Is that separate from mentors? And if it is that something that could be incorporated as well with the service?
Yes and yes. It is separate. It is something that could be incorporated, and that'll be another conversation. Yeah.
I'm just questioning your educators with 3 to 20 years of experience. I've always heard that research says that it takes 5 to 7 years for an educator to truly hone their skills. And so I'm just wondering why ours doesn't say 5 to 20.
Right.
That's what I've always been told.
Yeah. And you're right. That is what the research says. I chose 3 because of the DPI mentor program requirement. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I'm a proponent of having the teacher in the classroom with their students. And, I'm okay a couple days a week, but I'm not okay with more, because when you figure if they're sick and then you're taking them out for this, that continuity, and we have trouble getting subs. And, the best learning happens when the teacher is there. And so I'm more in favor of figuring out a way to compensate them, but it's not during the school day. Because I feel it's so important for the teacher to be in the classroom. And then one last thing that I've often heard educators say to me is, sometimes when a mentor has been assigned, it's not the best fit.
Okay.
And I just think that needs to be discussed, and I think a teacher should have the right to say, you know what, whether it's the new teacher or the mentor, we're not a fit. This is not going to go well, because we got a lot of money invested in our teachers, and we don't want to turn them off. So that was just what I've often heard, that, oh, I really didn't like my mentor, or they were in another building, or they've never taught kindergarten, but they're my mentor. So just FYI.
When you're talking about mentors and coaches, it seems to me that there's also a variable that takes place with the teacher themselves. I mean, I could see being in a classroom and knowing that there is another senior teacher that I would love to have be my mentor. And because we're talking relationships, so why not have that go both ways?
I agree with that. You gotta have chemistry to move forward.
I'm sure you're thinking about all of this, and that is the talk for the last several years. Coaches, instructional coaches, technology coaches, everything for implementation during the day. And the biggest problem is when a teacher is out of the building, that's time away from the student. And if you can have that working, whereas I'm thinking middle school and high school, you've got an hour off, go and watch a quality teacher. Go and watch, and not just with your mentor, but now you're getting coaching from the rest of the staff as well, with the young teachers that we have. So I like that idea, because that's tapping into the leadership of the teachers that have more experience, and it is giving the young people more of a and a comfort with the environment that they're working in as well.
Oh, and in elementary school, that would be great because during FIED or library or whatever, it's a half an hour time, and that can be part of what's in their evaluation. Taking that initiative and knowing that this teacher really knows how to teach writing. So every time that I have library, I'm going to go in her room and watch her or him teach writing. And then you're not dealing with subs. You got the continuity of the program, and I'm a proponent of that.
I'm just looking at the clock, and I know this is a big topic. We'll be revisiting this, and I'm happy to engage in this conversation anytime you like, but I think we did have a motion in there.
Okay. If there
people
aren't,
are comfortable with that.
yeah, we're ready to move with the motion. All right. Then I'm seeking a motion to approve the foundational components on which to develop a new Wausau School District compensation model.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thanks, everybody. This will be an ongoing conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Hiltz. That's very exciting. All right. Agenda item 10, facilities planning as it's related to strategic planning.
I'll take this one. You've heard a lot about our strategic plan already. You've taken action on parts of it. And in the next few months, and certainly in the next 3 years, you're going to be hearing us report out on how some of the elements of the strategic plan are going. And this is probably the first of which. We don't have the structure exactly established yet. We're looking for consistency. We're looking for templates. We're looking for something that you're going to see and you immediately say, this is a report on strategic planning. While we work on that, time is of the essence, I wanted to put this action in front of you. One of the SMART goals for strategic planning, we call it OR1. And OR1 is from optimization of resources. And optimization of resources has everything to do with aligning all of our resources, including our buildings, with our strategic priorities. And in order to do that, we need some work that may be happening in November 2020, and we back mapped to today. OR1 in particular, through optimizing staffing and building efficiencies, we want to have complete pupil service teams in every building. And that might require a referendum. And realistically, the earliest we could possibly go to referendum, in my opinion, is November 2020. So if we think about a referendum in November 2020 and back map, when does the board need to have their initial resolution done? When do we need the community to tell us that's the proper referendum question? Does it have anything to do with our facilities? And do we know enough currently about our facilities to make that call and put it in front of the community and have them help us make that call? Do we know enough about our enrollment and our capacity and all of the things that we need to bring to the community to make a good decision consistent with OR1, but our strategic plan in general? We need to do some work. Right now, Nexus Solutions knows our buildings as well as anybody other than the people working here. They know it from the inside more than anything. They know our HVAC. They know our windows, they know our roofs, they know everything about the performance of our buildings. They also happen to do this work throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin and maybe a little bit in other states, analyzing facilities from an educational adequacy perspective, from an enrollment perspective, from a grade alignment perspective, and we want them to help us develop some of that analytics. So you will see a rough Gantt chart. Don't hold us accountable to this. But take a look at the last star. That's a successful referendum vote in November of 2020. And that's a star because it's one instant in time. Here's another instant in time. Board sets the scope of the referendum with their initial resolution. Here's another instance in time. Task force recommendation of the board. Well, we don't have a task force built. We wouldn't know what to tell the task force. Well, we'd know something to tell them, but we need to fill in the gaps with some professional services, such as what Nexus can provide. So backing up from that star, review district enrollment capacity projections. I've offered some capacity projections, some capacity numbers, some enrollment projections. They'll help us maybe put a little bit more professionalism to it, maybe use a little bit of building in the growth of the community. Remember some of the assumptions we make. We take birth rates and we take which students are in which grade level right now. We don't take into consideration job growth, housing starts, building going on in different areas of the school district. They're going to help us bring some of those elements into the projection of the enrollment. Conduct facilities condition assessment. I'm here to tell you that we're pretty well on our way to that with Nexus's help. Conduct community awareness polling. When you hear the word polling or survey, you maybe have in your mind 20,000, 30,000 surveys going out to the community. In early discussions that we've been having with Nexus and internally, we're talking about something that's a little bit more thorough with fewer people selected. Perhaps a half-hour phone conversation with 500 district residents that are demographically representing the school district and those voters in the school district. Again, in order to get working on some of this stuff, we need to engage Nexus for some things that we're not currently engaging them for. Right now, they are our performance contractor. And we'd be asking them to do some of these services leading up to maybe a building project, maybe no building project. And they're taking that risk. And if they end up leading all the professional services for a building project, they would obviously get paid for that. But they wouldn't get paid for anything leading up to it. They already own a lot of the intel that we need. They're a trusted partner. They've been in front of the board. You've met some of these people individually. We would lose a lot of momentum if we had to go back out and do a full vetting process to select someone like Nexus. And by the way, about 3 or 4 years ago, we went through a full vetting process to select. Mm-hmm. So the motion I'm putting in front of you is asking you to give us the authority, or administration the authority, to engage Nexus with a master planning agreement and negotiate such with them. And of course, questions. You have some questions. And Larry Seiler's here, and he can fill in some gaps, and Dr. Hiltz has been in these conversations as well. We haven't done so much that we can't back up because we want your authority first, but everything seems to be in place.
Any questions for Bob, Larry, Dr. Hiltz?
Well, I just had a comment about, we've only once asked for an operation referendum and it failed, and it was for $5 million for 3 years, or I kind of forget. So that wasn't successful. The other thought I have is 2020 November is a presidential election, and I don't know if historically that's the best time to run a referendum because of the number of voters that are out. It's just popping into my head, those two things. That
get a lot more people coming to the polls to vote.
I've
against
heard,
it. Yeah.
I've heard both.
Or for it.
But I will say this, a presidential election has a higher turnout. And I feel better going forward with a referendum that has a higher turnout versus one that has a lower turnout. Win, lose, or draw, you get a wider representation of the community telling you what to do. And I feel a lot better when more people tell us, yes, we want to do this, or even no, we don't want to do this. And with other referendums that I've been part of, the goal isn't to pass the referendum. The goal is to give as much information as possible so the community can come out in full force and vote yes or no. And if it happens to be a presidential election, I don't think that can mess up our strategy. Also, keeping in mind, referendums don't come around as often as they used to. You've got every other November and you've got every April. That's really it. So you can't just start picking your referendum date like you could 2 years ago. So
it seems like referendums are passing right now.
And they certainly are passing, both operational and bond referendum. And a lot of this work could lead to an operational referendum. A lot of the work that we're doing in the other strategic strands could lead to an operational referendum.
One Nexus is one of the few partners in my time on the board that has always been extremely impressive.
Yeah.
To me, it's kind of it's a no-brainer at that point.
I'm just concerned that the one that I didn't think cost very much certainly didn't go over.
I think that was because it was for technology, and I don't think people really understood how important it was.
It's hard for a lot of the community.
was hard to get people to wrap their brains around it, and I think
Yeah,
as time goes by.
it sounds strange, but we probably would have been more successful not telling people what the money was for. And that shouldn't be the way it is, but many of the operational referendums that passed that same year did not tell people what the money was for. They just said, we just need money. And they passed. And we actually said, this is what we're going to use it for. And so anybody who didn't like that voted against it.
You're right. I read every referendum question, believe it or not. I mean, it's exciting reading. And I'm amazed at how some of them are. $2 million a year forever for operational expenses.
Yeah,
And they
ongoing,
passed.
never-ending referendum, operational referendum, without saying what it was for, we're passing that year.
So are you asking for a motion right now?
Yes, the motion's on the bottom.
Are there any other questions? All right, then I'm seeking a motion to authorize administration to negotiate and enter into a master planning agreement with Nexus Solutions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, the next item on the agenda, we're on agenda item number 11. Bob, is this also you?
Sure. Let me get my stuff in order here. We belong to a group, a consortium of investors, I guess we'll call it, called Wisconsin OPEB Trust. OPEB is other post-employment benefits. And we created a Fund 73, and it's a segregated fund that just is for other post-employment benefits funds. And we don't have the knowledge to invest $3-4 million for maximum return, so we joined Wisconsin OPEB Trust back in, I have it in here somewhere, but it was a while ago, right? Probably 2013 or 12, or just before I got here. It's in board book and,
February of 12.
thank you. And from time to time, I bring something that looks real clunky in board book, and it's a lot of precise descriptions and terminology that we're not all familiar with. And that has to do with any time all of the districts in this consortium make a decision together to go out to bid to change some of the professional services that we use. We need to update all the documents that form the agreement between us, all the participating districts, and the Wisconsin OPEB Trust. This is such an example. We went out to bid last fall to select a new trustee and custodian and select a new advisor to invest our money for us, and custodian trustee to hold on to our money and record all the transactions. So we went out to bid last fall, and it culminated with the selection about a month ago. We need the board, all the participating boards, to take action on these two resolutions and have them in place by July 1 to continue to be part of this group. So if we want to stay in Wisconsin OPEB Trust, we're left with no choice other than to have our boards pass these two resolutions to adopt the new trustee and custodian, BMO Harris Bank, and the new advisor, PMA Securities. And PMA, you might recognize, it's a pretty well-known name in this boardroom. They offer a lot of services, and they also advise on investments. And if we accept both of these resolutions, I can get them back to the Wisconsin OPEB Trust in time, and we can continue to be a part of that group July 1st and beyond.
All right, any questions? Okay, then I'm seeking a motion to accept the modified Wisconsin OPEB Trust and Custody Agreement and appointing the trustee as custodian by approving the presented adopting resolution.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
And then the second one is, I already gave the explanation, that's just for the actual advisor, that's PMA Securities, so.
Okay, any questions? All right, then I'm seeking a motion to accept the modified Wisconsin OPEB advisory agreement by approving the presented adopting resolution.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion carries. With that, it is 7:09 p.m. I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Meeting is adjourned.